This happened when I was around 10 or 11 years old, putting it somewhere between 2007 and 2008. I have a pretty terrible memory when it comes to my childhood, but I'm pretty sure it happened before I was in middle school. For a bit of context, the street I grew up on was one of those streets with a bunch of kids who always hung out after school. My family knew almost everyone on our street, save for a couple houses. Even if a family didn't have kids our age, most people would at least come out for the holidays like the 4th of July. So as we grew up, we always had a general idea of who our neighbors were. My younger brother D, who's 3 years younger than me, and I were especially close with a family about 5 houses down and across the street. Their son T was a year younger than me, and his little sister A was only a year or two younger than my brother, so we hung out a lot. This particular day, D and I asked our parents if we could go play with T and A at their house, and considering it was still early in the evening, they agreed. Due to the close distance, the walk to their house was only a minute or so. As D and I started to walk, I couldn't help but notice a strange figure in the distance, dressed in all black from head to toe. I thought it was weird, of course, but I couldn't tell which way they were facing, and T's house was so close that I didn't give them too much thought. As we got closer, however, I realized this figure was walking towards us, and as we got closer to each other, I also realized they weren't dressed in all black. They were wearing a gorilla suit. It was super strange, and even to this day, I still have no logical explanation for this. I was definitely creeped out, and I wish I could say that's where my creepy encounter ended, but unfortunately, that's not the case. D and I were only a house away from our friend's house at this point, but the closer we got to their house, the closer we got to the gorilla person. Right as we started to turn to get on the sidewalk, the person started almost galloping towards us, making loud noises. Mind you, this person didn't say a word this entire time, and now they were rushing towards us, making strange noises, so we of course panicked. My brother and I started sprinting towards T's house, my heart pounding hard in my chest as I thought something would have happened if the gorilla person got to us. We started pounding on the door, and T's mom answered, looking concerned and confused. Through the tears that I was fighting so hard to hold back, I somehow managed to say something about the creep who had started rushing at us, and she of course quickly ushered us inside. We told her what happened and she checked outside, but the person was long gone at that point. After that, we never saw that person or costume again. What gets me the most about this and what still sends shivers up my spine is that we never found out who that person was. They were likely just some adult who thought it'd be hilarious to scare the crap out of a couple kids, but the fact that we'll never know for sure still creeps me out. Considering we knew almost everyone on our street, I thought maybe at some point someone would joke about that time they scared me and my brother, and we'd all have a good laugh about it, but that day never came. At this point, I don't think we'll ever know who that was or why they were wearing that suit in the first place. Stay safe out there. This happened one night at around 12 a.m. I was driving home through my neighborhood, and there's another street that intersects mine. There's a stop sign on the other street, but not mine. I was coming up the intersection. Will admit I was going a little fast for my neighborhood, but nothing crazy. I see a car to my right on the other street at the stop sign. I believe I sped up a little. I figured they'd wait considering they were turning left onto the street, and I was on the opposite direction, and there was a car parked in that lane. So they turned left while simultaneously coming into my lane to avoid the car that was parked in the opposite lane. I slammed my brakes, nearly hitting the car that suddenly pulled into my lane diagonally. I didn't even honk, I just squeezed my car through, which was very difficult due to the parked car in the other lane and this bozo who was over halfway onto my side. I know I should have just stopped and waited for them to go, but they had a stop sign and turned left anyway, and after making the turn, they also felt the need to immediately go around the parked car, and that was now in their lane. I believe this was a guy that lived down the street from me. I think I recognized the car, but after the near collision, I just drove home. I'll add that I could basically see my house from where this happened. I glanced at my rear view and saw him pulling into a driveway. Then they started backing up and turned around, now following me this part of my street that just goes to a dead end. I know most of my close neighbors' cars, so I don't think it was anyone who lives right next to me. I pulled into my driveway, not really thinking they were following at first, but when I got to the top, I saw lights in my rear view again. When I got out of my car, they backed out of my driveway, honked at me, and drove back the way they came. I don't know what this person's intentions were with following me to my house, but I'm glad they calmed down or whatever. This story occurred a few years back. I would have been around 8 or 9 at the time. My old bedroom sat facing out towards the street and almost happened to be right next to our front door. It was very small as it had been built in place of our old front porch. The roof was slanted slightly downward toward the window, which took up most of the wall, and the bed could only fit one way. It was painted purple, not a nice purple either, like a kid's bedroom of course. My bed sat facing towards the door to my bedroom, parallel to the window. A closet took up part of the corner between my bedroom door and the window, making for an unusual space. Every night I checked to make sure the curtains were shut all the way, as the idea of people watching from the street made me very uncomfortable, even at a young age where things like that shouldn't even cross my mind. Every night I slept soundly, no nightmares, no sudden noises waking me in the middle of the night, nothing. That was until the middle of the year during school break. I remember waking to the sound of someone breathing. I couldn't move, couldn't catch my own breath. I was just stuck. I remember so clearly seeing a man stood in the corner of my room, stuck partly behind the curtain as if it would hide him. Of course I could see him. He was just this dark entity who stood and watched. After what felt like hours, I was able to get back to sleep. In the morning, I told my mom about what happened, and she explained it was just a strange nightmare and that I was fine, but the way she said it wasn't very believable. These cases of sleep paralysis went on for about a year, taking me up to the middle of the next year when I was likely still 8 or 9. I remember awaking in the middle of the night, just like I had most nights for the last year, to the man in the corner, only this time I could move. I stayed absolutely still, despite now knowing he was actually there. I can hear his faint breathing, like he was trying to hide from me as much as I was trying to hide from him. I couldn't help but think, has this man been here every night this year? I remember the thoughts I had, how I'd run out of my room and scream for my mom, how she'd call the police, how this man would be arrested and sent away, but he couldn't do that. He was basically in front of the door. I spent the night staring at him, trying to fall asleep. I'd say it was around 5 a.m. I was able to drift off, just sort of as the birds started to wake. I woke up, lo and behold he was gone. The first thing I did was tell my mom. She already looked uneasy, like she already knew. That was when I heard 2 people talking outside. I found out later that people were outside my window and a police officer who was taking an eyewitness statement. Around 6 in the morning, our neighbor spotted a man standing outside my window. She called the police, but he had gone before they arrived. Other neighbors stepped forward and saying they'd seen him outside the middle of the day, looking at our house. There were no signs of forced entry, only 2 footprints in the flower bed outside my window. My mother told the officers my account of what happened, and they came to the conclusion that he'd done the same thing last year. I saw it, and it sparked my tangent of sleep paralysis. The street light outside projected his shadow, so it appeared as though he was in my room. This whole time, he had been waiting patiently outside my room. Who knows what could have happened if my neighbor didn't spot him on her way out for work. Just a few minutes and she could have missed him entirely.